Hello, welcome to the Parent Partner Podcast, a place where you can get school district information, updates, and student and employee highlights. Here's your host, Superintendent Northcott.
This is Superintendent Northcott coming to you again through the Parent Partner Podcast. This is our 4th episode. Previously, I've told you that this podcast I would be reviewing some of the laws that were enacted during the most recent legislative session. I have to say that the most recent session was a very, very active session. More education bills proposed than ever before, more bills passed than ever before. We're talking more than 150 bills that were passed. Imagine if your business, your involvement in activities in the community or anything that you were doing, imagine if there was 150 changes per year, because this is this is the most ever, but this isn't unusual from the point of view of we always have, in the last 10 years, more than 100 bills that have been enacted. And so more than 100 changes every year, it is incredibly difficult to keep up with all of the changes. So out of the 166, I think, bills that passed, I've only chosen a few of those to give you an update of what those are, what they mean, and how they'll affect Daggett School District. So the first one I want to talk to you about is the Sensitive Materials Bill. This bill has been around for about 3 years, this idea, and we currently have code and rule and policy that governs the sensitive materials. So this is talking about anything that is highly sexualized in any of our reading materials. And this year the change is that they've created 2 tests by which to adjudicate whether some material, a book, reading material, instructional material, library material, anything like that, whether it is subject to the sensitive materials rules. The first test is the objective test, or what they're calling the red line test. And this is using criminal code for pornography, the definition of pornography that's in criminal code, and applying it to educational materials. And so if something passes that test, or rather fails that test, in that it is a graphic description or portrayal of human genitalia, of any sex acts, anything like that, where it has a graphic description, then that would fail the pornography test rule, which would then fail the objective test, and it is on its face then has failed the sensitive materials rule, and then is required to be removed from the library or the classroom or any other place that is being used. The second test is the subjective test, where something may fail the objective test. It may not be graphic in its description, but it is of a sexual nature that it then is somewhat offensive. And then that kind of material then goes to a committee. The committee members read the work in question and decide whether the sexual content is not so offensive, or there's other merit in the work that would then say that this has some educational purpose, or it has some artistic purpose. So, for example, you could argue that the statue of David, which is a statue that Michelangelo created, David in this portrayal of a human is fully naked. You could argue that has no artistic value and should fail the test, but there's going to be significant pushback to say that one of Michelangelo's most famous works has no artistic value. That's going to get some pushback. So there's a process. If something like that were to come up, we would go through a process, and a committee of educators and parents would decide what they feel about this work, and does it have some merit, and then could be allowed in schools. And obviously all of these things are age specific or age appropriate. You might not present the statue of David in the second grade, but you might in a senior art class, for example. And then there's another part of this sensitive materials rule where if 3 districts across the state of Utah, or 2 districts and a number of charter schools, if they all rule that the material fails the sensitive materials test and that it's going to be removed, then there's a potential impact for all school districts and all charters across the state. When 3 districts, for example, say that they're going to remove something, then that goes to the State Board of Education, where they either say, yes, this is going to be applied statewide, or they'll say the individual school districts will have the right to adjudicate this on an individual basis, and each board would then be required to say this fails or it doesn't fail the sensitive materials test, and according to how it survives in the testing process, whether it would be allowed to be used in any specific school district. And it's interesting, I've been here for 31 years as a teacher, as a principal, and as a superintendent. And I've never received a request that some of our materials are too sexualized and that they should be removed. We're a conservative community. We have conservative opinions for the most part amongst our teachers. Our purchasing processes, we don't allow the purchase of stuff that is way out there, and not saying that something like that couldn't end up on our shelves or in our classroom. In 30 years so far, I've never had an incident where anything rose to that level. But there are rules now that clearly explain the process by which, if there were materials like that in the library or in the classroom, then there's a process by which they can be adjudicated and removed if necessary. The second thing that I want to talk about today, the second of maybe 10 different things, but number 2 on my list is some safety things that have occurred in this legislative session. You may be aware that in the past 15 years or so that Sandy Hook has taken place, Parkland has taken place. 2 years ago we had Uvalde. Each of these incidents and many others where there was significant loss of life, both for students and for teachers. This issue of safety has risen in the state of Utah, so there are multiple bills that address several issues related to this level of safety. It's already within the law that a teacher or any employee of the school district could have a concealed carry. They do not have to report that to the district. I don't ask. I don't know if anyone does carry. If they do carry, I don't know. The one law, HB 119, is along this issue of the concealed carry, that someone who has concealed carry, if they wanted to, could somewhat reveal themselves, and they would be allowed to purchase a biometric safe that their firearm would then no longer be on their person. Concealed carry requires that it be on their person at all times. This would allow that the concealed carry weapon would not be on their person, but would be in a biometric safe that would be stored somewhere in the classroom or in an office, and that weapon would not necessarily be on the person's body at all times. So that's HB 119. In HB 84, which has become known as the Guardian Bill, if you will, the first thing that it requires is that there be single entrances for schools. It requires that there be a panic button in every classroom. It requires that we strengthen the security of windows, and you can make them bullet resistant or bulletproof. Obviously, cost is an issue in all of that. But let me say that in anticipation of some of these rules, we knew they were coming, and the school district here, we've been involved for several years already in doing some specific things. So, for example, we already have only one entrance for our buildings. Now, there's more than one entrance in terms of a door, but Manila Elementary, for example, if you as a patron want to get into the building, then you have to go in the main door. The other doors are locked most of the time. Obviously, we have to let children in and out of the school for recess and those kinds of things. But probably 90% of the day, all of the doors are locked, and the only door that is being manned, if you will, is the front door, where the school secretary is, and that's how you get in and out. And the other doors are not available for that. So we've already done that to our schools. And our doors are fobbed, which means that I can get into the school with just a fob that allows me in. There's an electronic record of when I went in and the fact that it was a fob assigned to me. There's an electronic record of everyone that goes in and out of the schools using a fob. And then we started with that a couple of years ago by putting fobs on the exterior doors. And then this past year we have added all of the instructional doors, so doors leading to classrooms, are now also fobbed. And we have the ability, with the press of one button, to lock all doors at once. In the case of a total school lockdown, we can lock every door with the press of one button. So we're doing good there. We have security film on windows. Ground level windows is what the law requires. All of our buildings are ground level buildings. We're in the process of putting security film on the windows. The security film is bullet resistant, if I could say it that way, not bulletproof per se. If you fired a .38 caliber weapon at the window, the bullet would not go through. The bullet would be flat, it would be stuck on the window, but it would not go through. An AR-15 might go through. If the bullet did go through, the window would not explode. There will be a hole, but the window is still intact. And the windows are so strong with this security film on them that even with a sledgehammer, you cannot make that window explode open. You could reach through the shards and unlock it and open it. No, you can't do that because this material that we're using is very strong, and not that you could never get through, but it would take such an incredible effort that we would have time to respond to someone who was trying to break through a window. We also have increased our security presence in terms of, I think there was a time when there was maybe 20 cameras in the whole district. We're heading towards 80 cameras, and those cameras have a higher fidelity. We're able to see more. We have some sound capabilities, and this protects our children, protects our teachers, and it's also part of the law. Another piece of this law then is this issue of the guardian. The law says that we're supposed to have an SRO, a safety resource officer, in every school. That's a significant challenge for many schools across the state. An SRO is a police officer who has been through post, has a car and has bulletproof vesting and gun and all of those tools. It's very expensive. More than $100,000 per officer, per school, per year to provide that. And there's no funding from the state for that purpose. We do have funding from the state in this law that is related to the hardening of schools, not related to the providing of salaries for literally hundreds and hundreds of SROs that would be needed across the state. So also within the law, there's the ability to hire a security service, or the third option is to create a guardian within the district, within a building, who is an employee of the school district, who is armed and who has been trained, and that person is then present in the building from the opening of school in the morning till the close of school in the afternoon. Because of cost, that's what Daggett will be likely forced to do. Ultimately, that's a school board decision, but I can see that being the decision. First off, there aren't SROs available to be hired if you could even afford them. Across the state, we are short 300 highway patrol. We're short officers in town and city police forces, whether that's big city, Salt Lake City, Ogden, suburban settings, Sandy, Utah, and maybe the worst in rural settings. Because if you didn't know, there's an EMS security crisis in rural Utah, and that is affecting us in Daggett County. So we're headed down the road where we will have a guardian. We're not supposed to reveal who that is, for obvious security reasons, but we're headed down the road where there will be an armed person present in our buildings every day that school is open. For some people, this is something that can't happen soon enough. For some people, they're appalled that there would be loaded weapons in schools. This has been a huge discussion at the legislative level, and the law passed, and so we will be heading down that road. To my next issue then. It is now state law that children have to be potty trained in order to enter school as a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, obviously 5-year-olds. That's something that we've been doing here, but that is now state law. A fourth issue, and there's no particular rhyme or reason to how I'm presenting these. HB 347, an education rights bill for parents, talks about the right for a student to receive their education in a setting that is free from violence. In Daggett, we are a fully inclusive school district, so all of our students attend the general ed classroom. There are times of the day when they might be pulled from that classroom to get intensive one-on-one instruction. But in general, all students in Daggett School District are in the general ed classroom. We do not have what is commonly known as self-contained units. And so the possibility of having a student who is disruptive in some way, and the new law requires that we do something about times when that is the case. So you can't be in a classroom and month after month after month after month after month that the classroom is so disrupted because of a violent or disruptive student that the teacher is struggling to instruct. And some would argue then that the nonviolent students, their education is being interrupted, is being hampered because there's a violent or disruptive student in the classroom. The new law requires that we act. We already do this, but now it's backed up by law that says that a disruptive student can't disrupt continually and forever. And so we have to do something about it. A next issue. This is a fees issue, HB 415. I'm discussing this, but it doesn't really affect us, and I'll tell you why. It's coming that general fees and classroom fees will no longer be allowable. We already don't do that. We don't have a general fee. We don't have classroom fees. If it's part of the required instruction, then we're paying for everything. And I say we, the school district is. Well, most school districts across the state, that is not the case. They have general fees and they have classroom fees. We're one of the few school districts that historically, at least for the last 30 years, where there have not been those kinds of fees. We can still charge for things like if you steal a book or if you damage your computer, we can still bill you for those kinds of things. Graduation swag is not on that list. If you buy graduation swag, that's your own deal. We used to require that students rent a graduation gown. We've now bought our own gowns and have enough of them that we can meet any size of person. They're all the same color. We've then done that so that there is no fee, if you will, or at least we've reduced the fees for graduation. I think you still buy your cap and your tassel because that's a consumable and you get to keep those. So there'll be some clarity on that, although it doesn't really affect us much because we've already been doing that for years. Let me go on to another issue, social media, HB 464. And this is, again, a sort of a parents' rights issue. We know that it's possible to become addicted to social media. We have kids in school here. If you take their phone away from them, they physically begin to shake. They are so addicted to the swipe, they can't not have that. We know of kids that text all night long, et cetera, et cetera. Well, if a parent can prove that their student is addicted to social media and that social media is doing some harm to the student, it is now permissible that a parent could actually sue the social media companies. There is two efforts that I'm aware of from the AG's office and from the governor's office in an attempt to sue social media companies at the state level that we think that there's damage being done to kids. And so, for example, the TikTok movement, there's TikTok challenges that are happening across the world, and some students in school districts choose to do those. I am personally aware of a school where the kids accepted a challenge, and the challenge was to destroy washrooms. They did $50,000 worth of damage. That's utter foolishness. We're certainly opposed to that kind of stuff. And how far that goes, we already have a rule that says kids can't have their cell phones in the classroom unless the classroom activity requires that they have cell phones. But that's as far as we're going. And in terms of restricting that, we sometimes are forced to take phones away from kids. We allow the parents to pick them up. But there's a move at the state level to restrict this and indeed to document and prove and sue social media organizations for the damage that they're doing to kids. And in turn, that damage, as it shows up in schools, we're trying to put a stop to all of that. Next issue, HB 418, a student offender law, talking about sexual offenses. One of the things that we need to be careful of and aware of here is that even mooning or someone pulling down someone else's pants, the proverbial pantsing someone, those kinds of offenses are now criminal acts and are subject to laws where we have to go to a re-entry process. This is something that parents do not want to get involved with. And so we're just giving notice that kind of stuff, pantsing someone, mooning someone in school, could get you into an awful lot of trouble and is now considered a sexual offense inside of a school setting. Next issue. This is a kindergarten bill that requires parents have access to a half-day kindergarten option. So we have full-day kindergarten across the state. Kindergarten is not a required attendance. It's not subject to the required attendance laws. Most parents across the state choose to send their children to kindergarten, but there are some cases where a half-day kindergarten would be the optimal attendance pattern. And it is state law now that is permissible and that school districts have to offer that. We have in Daggett School District, we have always offered an option like that, even when we were in extended day or when we are now in full day kindergarten. Parents have always had the option to go to a half day. And for us, a half day would be morning until the lunchtime let out, which is not quite exactly half. The morning is actually a little longer than the afternoon, but we would call that a half day. And so parents have the right, if they want, to enroll their child in a half-day kindergarten, and the child would be released every day at lunchtime. Parents would be required to provide the transportation if they chose that option, and they would just let the school know that that's what they want, and we would arrange that with them and for them. And the last issue that I'm going to talk about is a teacher issue related to maternity leave. There is a move across the state for state employees that maternity leave, paid maternity leave, that we're growing that issue. And I believe this HB 431 would provide 3 weeks of paid maternity leave, which is different than sick leave that might be taken related to maternity, and is also different than FMLA leave, which could be taken related to maternity. All of those have a little bit different rules. Sick leave and maternity leave are more closely related. FMLA leave does not have to be paid leave unless you have maternity and or sick leave accrued, that you have enough of those days that a 12-week leave of absence through FMLA would be paid. If you don't have sick leave or maternity leave saved up, then your leave is unpaid, but you are guaranteed that you have a job at the end of 12 weeks. Over the years, we've had a few employees who have requested FMLA leave. FMLA is not directly related to maternity, although maternity is one of the cases that is permissible, but other kinds of sick leave, other reasons for sick leave, those would fall under the FMLA leave. So these are some of the newest things that are coming out through the legislation that has occurred from January through March. And at the beginning I said there was 166 bills. There's a whole lot more that I could talk about. I've just chosen these 10 issues to give everyone in the community a heads up. Certainly welcome questions, welcome a dialogue, and we'll be as open and transparent as we can on all these issues. Again, appreciate you visiting with me today. It's a wonderful opportunity for me to speak to the community and share with you these issues. This has been episode 104 of the Parent Partner Podcast. Thank you for visiting with me today. We'll see you next time.